Good afternoon, guys. It's Preacher. You will forgive my sort of mellow intro. It is late here and people are sleeping. As such, I'm going to be not screaming and shouting throughout this one, but I did want to get out sort of the weekly question. We posed this last week, a bit of a debate that people spent a few days talking about, and it actually went down really well with you guys. I think you guys love a bit of something where you can have a proper discussion. I'm playing some Smash Brothers in the background. Don't hate, it's the first time I've actually played it, so I'm still learning the controls and whatnot. I got this email from one of the best resto shamans in the world, which happens every now and again. It's kind of rare that the top guys in the world actually admit that they watch my stuff, but a lot of them do, which is fine. I kind of get it. A lot of people in the top end guilds either believe they know better, which is fine, or that I'm wrong, which sometimes I am, and or otherwise that it's just something they expect to know. So I always appreciate when one of the guys actually says who he's from, because they can send things to me anonymously, and that's awesome. But it is a topic that it keeps popping up, but it pops up in sort of the Blizzard post and MMO Champion in a way that's sort of like underhand. It tends to be buried below something more interesting, which is like, oh, look at all this loot information that we're talking about. Oh, look at all this new coin stuff. And then right at the bottom, this kind of topic just kind of trickles in, and then it disappears for a few more weeks. But it's certainly an issue that I think the game kind of has. But we're going to leave this over to debate and get your thoughts on it, and then we'll sort of summarize it towards the end of the week. Give people a chance to think about it. The email comes in like this: Hey Preacher, I wanted to get your thoughts on smart heals. I've been healing since vanilla. As you can see by my guild, I'm not a noob, but I happen to agree with you regarding DPS being the real challenge. This is mostly because I think smart heals have made my role more of a clock watcher and reduced my actual involvement in what my spells do. Yeah, smart heals. Smart heals are everywhere now, aren't they? They're absolutely everywhere. So we're going to look at this from a couple of perspectives, from sort of the top end down to the bottom end. From my healing perspective, I healed all the way through vanilla. I was a holy priest through vanilla, and this is kind of before smart heals, right? Smart heals kind of came in the Burning Crusade in the form of Prayer of Mending, and of course then we had the one that really caused the big problems, which was Chain Heal. Chain Heal became so dominant by the end of TBC that Resto Shaman by default were stacked ridiculous numbers in the Sunwell. To give you an idea of how powerful this smart healing system became, I'd advise you to go and check, and I'll put a link if I can find the video, is SK Gaming's world first kill versus Kill Jaden. And towards the end of that video, you'll actually see the perspective of Mech, who was one of the guild masters, the raid leaders, and a resto shaman. And what you'll notice is that, in fact, the way the smart heal system was being abused and used to almost take away a lot of choice from healers and focus themselves on raid awareness and raid survivability and personal survivability, is you'll actually see that he chain heals himself and just spams the chain heal onto himself rather than moving characters around and clicking other targets, and therefore the chain heal's smart effect actually goes out and finds people who need healing, and that became a very, very effective way of playing. It's not a case of that is lazy or a bad player, that is a supremely effective way of playing. As such, the smart heal resto shaman stacking didn't go unnoticed. This idea that players could be super effective, but also generalizing, and I'm not talking about Mech or SK Gaming here, I'm talking about the fact that a lot of guilds saw what was happening. They saw they needed a ton more resto shaman, and it didn't actually matter if they were good players. And that's the interesting point there. It didn't actually matter if those players were any good at all. What we were saying now was, hey, this spell, in essence, is very, very powerful. What we want is a lot of this spell. And whoever can press this button repeatedly is the kind of person we want. And we were guilty of this in Kill Count Lost, is we recruited a lot of resto shaman who weren't very good, but they had some sort of tier 6 gear, or they could be easily geared, or they were just missing a few pieces to be somewhat effective. And as such, we did recruit them, and we stuck them in the raid over better players, and then we just had them spam chain heal, and that was it. And they were very, very effective healers. They would out-heal some very good paladins, they would out-heal some very, very good priests, and very regularly actually replace those paladins, healers, priests, and druids, because having more resto shamans was so much more effective, especially on fights like the Twin Eridars. We would try and remove them for other fights, such as, say, Brutalis and Kalek and Even Muru, to an extent, we would have a couple of Resto Shaman there for Muru. But in a case where it's serious healing and everybody's taking raid damage, which is again a by proxy of this, is the fact that so many people are taking raid damage on such a random integer that Chain Heal would actually actively seek out people to heal, that actually countered that very effectively. So as we moved into Wrath of the Lich King, the smart heals became more prevalent, especially things like the Healing Tide tomes, Healing Stream tomes, which were actually seeking things out, and the Healing Rains. We also had Efflorescence and things like that. And now a lot of people don't really understand how these spells work, so just a brief summary is if you have a spell like Efflorescence or Healing Rain, and you put that down on the floor, a lot of people seem to think that that's just healing everybody in that area. Well, that's not exactly true. That's not how those spells work. They're actually seeking out people, and they heal, I think it's down to 7 now at a time. They're just finding the weakest 7 in that area, and then they're healing those people up. I could be a little confused on the numbers there, but that's the way it works. Similar with spells like Circle of Healing and Prayer of Mending, Renewing Mist. All these spells actually just go out and actively seek people who need healing, and it makes the decision for you, and that's the kind of important part here, is it's making the decision for you. For the top end, I can see why this is becoming a problem, because in a lot of the guides, I do a lot of guides for you guys, is when I'm doing a healing guide, some of the big lessons I try and instill into people is you need to keep X spell on cooldown. And there's a reason behind that I generally don't go into the guide, as it's not necessary in the guide to go into full detail on these kind of spells. So one of these things is, say, if you're playing, I don't know, an AoE priest, it'd be something like Prayer of Mending, is you want to keep that spell on cooldown. It's different if you're single targeting, I know. Similar with a Resto Druid or Efflorescence, you want to keep that down. If you're playing a Mistweaver Monk, you want to be keeping your Renewing Mist on cooldown. Now, the actual reason for that is because, yes, it's going to do a tremendous amount of healing, but not because you're being a particularly great player. Your actual skill starts and ends with the cooldown of the spell. And that's it. There's some argument to be made, say, with Renewing Mist, that part of that skill is in fact clicking somebody who doesn't already have Renewing Mist, but you can see how trivial an aspect of that is. So your actual player ability is literally just making sure you're pressing this button when it's off cooldown. Beyond that, the Renewing Mist goes on, and then it goes off and it does its job. It finds people who need healing, and it just sticks to them like glue. The same with a Prayer of Mending. You might fire it at the tank, but then when that guy takes damage, your Prayer of Mending then goes off and searches for somebody who needs healing, and all that decision process is actually taken completely out of your hands, and you're then reduced to, as described in the question, which is in fact just a guy pressing a button on cooldown, and you're not actually thinking about it too much. Is that too different from what everybody else is doing? Not in most cases, actually. It really is not. The problem comes in that a lot of healers actually take pride in being better, or being able to demonstrate they are better players, and very, very quickly assessing the situation and reacting to it. Smart heals, with there being such an abundant amount of them, actually doesn't demonstrate the fact those people doing very smart nature swiftness here and there. There's such a minor spell that's being cast now that in fact you don't get to see that separation as much as what you used to see in the past. Now, I don't think this is a rose-tinted thing. There's good and bad sides to this. So the other aspect that we've got to look at here is, while at the top end, we do have the people who are just managing it on cooldown and letting it do its business and maybe feeling a little bit dejected. I'd certainly advise a lot of you to, if you're interested in this subject, is to actually check the World of Logs and look at certain classes and see how much of their healing is actually smart heal based. And remember that those are heals which aren't decided by the player, which is like the important one. If you check something like a Resto Shaman, what you'll find is very, very high is Healing Tide Totem, very, very high is Healing Stream Totem, and these are things that are actually searching out people to heal, and all you've actually done to create this huge, enormous surge of healing is actually just press it on cooldown, and that's why people feel a little bit dejected by that. Now let's talk about the mid-level. Smart heals may feel like this to top-end players, but I would argue very strongly, as a counter to the point that smart heals are maybe too powerful, which is certainly what the aim of this is smart heals are too powerful. I want the spells that I decide on to be much more effective than the ones that the game is deciding for me. In the mid-level to low level, that's actually not a very good thing. If we were to look at LFR, and I don't like to generalize LFRs, you do get very good healers in there as well, is in fact the smart heals are basically what carry those raids. Those raids would almost be non-existent if it wasn't for the existence of smart heals, because after looking even from workshops of people who follow my channels of what a healing UI looks like, it isn't the best, and it's certainly not very effective in terms of using single target or other more player-derived spells. Those smart heals are in fact what make those dungeons possible. In a lot of cases, as much as it's difficult to die in LFR, there are certainly situations that need healing up. And what happens when you've got your low to mid players is they start spamming their AoE heals, they start spamming their smart heals, and they start making them make more work for you. It's very rare, in fact, that I see mid-level to low-level players actually use their single targets more than absolute minimum. In fact, if we look at, say, a Resto Shaman in LFR, what you'll often find is they literally just drop Healing Rain, and they use Healing Stream and Healing Tide on cooldown, and that's pretty much it. But in doing so, they generally can be very, very high up on the meters, and as such, those smart healing abilities are actually what's making that dungeon work. Without those abilities, that dungeon isn't working. You'll certainly see people popping Spirit Link Tomes. Tranquility is often one that you can regularly see if you're watching other healers. If you're not a healer, so you can actually see that people are popping Tranquility at all sorts of random times, which is, again, is, you know, AoE healing a lot of people, but certainly actively finding people to heal. And as such, for the guys who are learning to heal, these are very important props and tools, and they're in fact things that a lot of us take advantage of on a very regular basis. I very rarely ever find myself being healed by a single target spell when I'm in something like LFR, or even in a 5-man for that matter. I've seen a lot of people play Holy Priests and certainly not use the tools that are there for them in their chakras, their single targets. They very regularly are just spamming Circle of Healing, Prayer of Healing, and that's about it, even when under supreme conditions. I think one of the most obvious videos I can refer you to is the Guardian Druid video I did in early 5.0, where we had a Holy Paladin who did nothing more, even though I was the only one taking damage, than spam Light of Dawn. And in fact, through the whole video, it kind of went a little bit off topic, and it just ended up me getting very angry at watching this guy just spam Light of Dawn uncontrollably, despite the fact that he was healing me for absolutely nothing. But if he was in an LFR environment, that's exactly what he would be doing at that time in order to be the most effective, is take advantage of the smart heal, that heal will go out and find people who have taken damage, and he doesn't have to worry about it. And perhaps it does increase his survivability, perhaps it does increase his personal effectiveness. What do you think about the smart heals? Do you like them? Do you feel like they're a little bit too powerful? I think that's the big question here. I don't think they should be removed or anything like that. No one's trying to start a little war. Are they too effective? Is that a problem? When you look at your healing done and see that the top 3, or perhaps top 2, or 2 out of 3 in the top spells are smart heals that have done healing for you, which you didn't really have to put a lot of effort into to achieve. You certainly weren't seeking people out to heal. Did that bother you, or are you not bothered at all? It's a little discussion for this week, and we'll review this towards the end of the week as well. I'm back on topic with working tomorrow, hopefully, and we should get some good stuff out for you guys. Other than that, I hope you had a great weekend. I'm sorry I wasn't around. I'm just extremely busy right now. I will see you then very, very soon. See you guys.